Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. In the news tonight, New Zealand, 5 have been confirmed dead following White Island's volcanic eruption. Police in New Zealand have said they don't expect to find any more survivors from a volcanic eruption on White Island that killed at least 5 people and injured up to 20. No signs of life have been seen at any point, police said, after rescue helicopters and other aircraft carried out a number of aerial reconnaissance flights over the island following the eruption on Monday afternoon. Police believe that anyone who could have been taken from the island alive was rescued at the time of the evacuation. Up to 24 people remain unaccounted for, and officers are urgently working to confirm the exact number of those who have died, a police statement has said. Unstable conditions, toxic gases and ashfall have prevented rescue teams from searching the island, which lies 30 miles to the east of New Zealand's North Island, in the Bay of Plenty. The country's most active cone volcano erupted at 2:11 p.m. on Monday afternoon, sending up a huge plume of ash, which was visible from the North Island. Police say about 50 people were on the island at the time, more than 20 of whom were Australian tourists. 23 people have been rescued. All of those rescued had sustained injuries, mostly burns, police said, and 7 people who were in a critical condition have been flown to hospitals in Tauranga and Auckland. St John's Ambulance Service treated at least 20 people who were injured, with ambulance officers travelling to the island with the Coast Guard and 7 helicopters, which had been dispatched with paramedics on board. A spokeswoman initially said the service's medical director would establish a triage unit on the island when he arrived, but this later proved to be impossible. The New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who visited the nearby coastal town of Wakatane on Monday evening, said the situation was significant and evolving. John Timms, the Deputy Police Commissioner of District Operations, said at least 24 people remained on the island, but he cannot be sure of the exact number. The physical environment is unsafe for us to return to the island, he said. Ardern said she was liaising closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the police have confirmed that those missing on the island were New Zealanders and foreign nationals. The Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, confirmed that Australians had been caught up in the eruption, and he offered immediate emergency support. Kevin O'Sullivan, the Chief Executive Officer of the New Zealand Cruise Association, said that a tour party of 30 to 38 people from the Ovation of the Seas had been touring White Island when the eruption took place, and the party had not returned. Their names and nationalities were being given to the police, he said. The ship would remain in Tauranga until at least overnight. Royal Caribbean, which owns the Ovation of the Seas, asked for prayers to be said for all those involved. Ardern said police were unable to land on the island because of the danger of another eruption and dangerous, unstable conditions on the ground. A Red Cross webpage has been set up for families to register missing relatives. It includes people from Australia, New Zealand, the United States, the UK and elsewhere. Dr. Ken Glairdale of the GNS Science Group said the volcano was unpredictable. It was not a particularly big eruption, he said. It was almost like a throat-clearing eruption. It showed increased activity over the last few weeks, and so we raised the alert level. The alert level, a level 4 alert, was issued for the volcano, also known by its Maori name of Wakari, indicating that a moderate volcanic eruption was possible, according to the science agency GeoNet. The scale runs from 0 to 5, a major eruption. GeoNet had registered moderate volcanic unrest on the island for weeks before Monday's eruption. Footage taken from the volcano's crater camera appeared to show people in the area just minutes before it erupted. About 10,000 people a year visit the volcano. The Civil Defence Authority has warned that the situation was hazardous in the immediate vicinity of the volcano, which is 48 kilometres off the coast of the Bay of Plenty. After the eruption, the police blocked streets close to the sea, and the Met Service Weather Agency has warned pilots to avoid the area. White Island, which last experienced a short-lived eruption in 2016, in which no one was hurt. And now to news from the UK. Boris Johnson has been accused of not caring after he repeatedly refused during a TV interview to look at a photograph of a 4-year-old boy forced to sleep on the floor in an overcrowded accident in the emergency unit, before pocketing the reporter's phone on which he was being shown the picture.
In an ITV interview during a campaign visit to a factory in Sunderland, the Prime Minister was challenged about the plight of Jack Willermint Barr, who was pictured sleeping under coats on a hospital floor in Leeds as he waited for a bed, despite having suspected pneumonia. Johnson refused to look at the photo and, out of camera shot, eventually took the phone from the reporter and put it in his own pocket. Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, responded by tweeting a video of the exchange with the message, "He just doesn't care." First asked if he had seen the photographs, Johnson said that he had not. The ITV reporter Joe Pike then showed the Prime Minister the photograph on his phone, describing what it portrayed. Johnson declined to look at the picture, saying, "I understand, and obviously we have every possible sympathy for everybody who has a bad experience in the NHS." He went on to discuss investment in the NHS and Brexit. Pike pressed the Prime Minister, "I'm talking about this boy, Prime Minister. How do you feel looking at that photo?" Johnson replied, "Of course, and let me tell you, I haven't had the chance to look at it." Pike asked, "Why don't you look at it now, Prime Minister?" Johnson, still not looking at the photo, replied, "I'll study it later." Pressed again, he said, "If you don't mind, I'll give you an interview now. What we are doing is we are taking this country forward and we are investing in the NHS." Johnson then appeared out of camera shot to take the phone out of Pike's hand and put it into his coat pocket. The reporter challenged him on this. "You've refused to look at the photo. You've taken my phone and put it in your pocket, Prime Minister. His mother says the NHS is in crisis. What is your response to that?" At this point, Johnson removed the phone, and looked at the picture for the first time. It's a terrible, terrible photo, and I apologise, obviously, to the family and all those who have terrible experiences in the NHS. But what we are doing is supporting the NHS, and on the whole, I think that patients in the NHS have a much, much better experience than this poor kid has had. Johnson ended by handing back the phone. "I'm sorry to have taken your phone. There you go." The SNP said that Boris Johnson's reaction to images of a child on the floor of a hospital in England showed that the Tories can't be trusted with the NHS. Dr. Philippa Watford said, "Boris Johnson's reaction shows the Tories can't be trusted with the NHS." Attempting to turn a question about a child in pain into an answer about Brexit shows how little Boris Johnson and his right-wing Tories care about people, our public services, and in particular our NHS. Dr. Whitford went on, "And while the NHS has devolved in Scotland, I cannot escape the impact of Tory austerity and any Trump trade deals that push up drug prices. All health services face challenges, but where the NHS are focused on improving Scotland's NHS, Boris tried to turn a blind eye. The Tories should never be allowed near the NHS, and by blocking a Boris Johnson government on Thursday, by voting SNP is essential to ensure that we can properly protect Scotland's NHS." Boris Johnson has also threatened to take the BBC's licence fee away as a source of funding. The Prime Minister suggested that the licence fee, which is guaranteed to continue until at least 2027, was a general tax that can no longer be justified when other media organisations have found other ways of funding themselves. Johnson's threat to the publicly funded status of the BBC came as he faced growing pressures on a difficult day for his campaign. As Labour branded him uncaring, the Prime Minister took questions from workers at a haulier in the Labour stronghold of Washington in the North East, arguing in favour of Brexit alongside the former Labour MP Gisela Stewart. Asked why he would not get rid of the TV licence fees, Mr Johnson said, "At this stage we're not planning to get rid of all licence fees, although I'm certainly looking at it. I'm under pressure not to extemporise policy on the hoof. But you have to ask yourself whether that kind of approach to funding a TV media organisation still makes sense in the long term, given the way that other media organisations manage to fund themselves. The system of funding out of effectively a general tax bears reflection. How long can you justify a system whereby everybody who has a TV has to pay to fund a particular set of TV and radio channels? Any changes to the BBC's funding model would require Parliament to pass fresh legislation, with the broadcaster's Royal Charter currently guaranteeing the existence of the licence fee until 2027. However, separate negotiations will soon start over how much the BBC can charge for the licence fee from 2022 onwards, offering an opportunity to limit the organisation's funding. A Tory source later said that the government had been looking at two options: scrapping the licence fee or decriminalising its non-payment. The policy was not mentioned in the Conservative Party manifesto, but Nicky Morgan, the outgoing Culture Secretary, hinted last month that the days of the licence fee could be numbered. Morgan, who is standing down as an MP, had said that she was open-minded about scrapping the licence fee and replacing it with a Netflix-style subscription service, although sources in her department later downplayed the significance of her comments. The BBC is already dealing with the aftermath of a decision to start charging most over 75s for the fee, which will come into effect this summer. The corporation was forced to make the cut after former Chancellor George Osborne pushed the BBC to take responsibility for the benefit, which was previously paid by the government. Workers at Ferguson's Transport gave the Prime Minister a tough time over the potential impact of Brexit on jobs in the North East and a Tory disinformation during the campaign. Paige Hood, an administrator, tackled him over why the Tories had paid for fake news website on top of the to be the top Google result when people searched for Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto. He declined to answer, saying that he hadn't the foggiest idea what she was talking about and claimed it was a media diversion. And now, treatment of Scotland justifies a second Indie Ref 2, says Nicola Sturgeon. The contemptuous way in which Scotland has been treated is justification for a new vote on independence, regardless of Brexit, Nicola Sturgeon said today. The First Minister has put a referendum at the heart of the SNP's campaign for the general election on the 12th of December. And she said the country's interests, its voice and views had been ignored over the past 3 years. Speaking on a BBC radio interview, the SNP leader said, "My manifesto in 2016 said a material change in circumstances such as, for example, Brexit. The material change, yes, is the prospect of Scotland being taken out of the EU, but also the contemptuous way in which Scotland has been treated, with our interests, our voice and our views ignored. We've seen that in spades over the last 3 years. I've been very clear in this election. I think it's right for Scotland to have the choice over our own future. Whatever that choice happens to be is up to the people in Scotland, if it's independence or not. And that ability to choose is far preferable to having the choice made for us by a Westminster government, particularly one led by Boris Johnson." And now, the SNP is urging voters to vote SNP to keep Boris Johnson out of number 10. With 3 campaigning days to go, SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon has urged Scots to team up to lock Boris Johnson out of Downing Street, escape Brexit and to protect our NHS. Warning of the impact a Tory government would have as she visits Coatbridge, Lanark and Hamilton East and Rutherglen, Nicola Sturgeon said, "Whatever your traditional party colours, there is only one way across Scotland to defeat Boris Johnson, and that is to vote SNP. This election is way too important to let traditional party politics get in the way of stopping Boris Johnson getting into number 10. We know that in the 13 Tory-held seats across the country, every SNP vote will count when it comes to getting the Tories out of office and stopping Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister. When the Tories have majorities, Scotland always paid a heavy price. In the 1980s, they decimated our industries. In past decades, they have imposed crippling cuts on public spending and pushed thousands of Scots into poverty. This time, Boris Johnson threatens to take us out of Europe in just 8 weeks at the cost of thousands of jobs and putting our precious NHS at risk, threatening the work that Scotland is doing to deliver better healthcare free at the point of need. A vote for the SNP can deliver protection for the NHS, support for Scotland's economy, an escape from Brexit. But perhaps most importantly in this election, it can prevent Boris Johnson getting back into government. Labour and the Lib Dems are too far behind to beat the Tories, so it's time for Scotland to team up and to vote SNP to block Boris Johnson. There's only one way for Scotland to wake up on Friday morning free of Boris Johnson and free of the Tories, and that is by voting SNP.
And other news, a Conservative general election candidate shared messages on social media claiming Muslims play the race card and have a nasty culture in the latest escalation of concern over Islamophobia in the party. The former BBC journalist Lyndon Kemkaran, who is standing for the Conservatives in Labour-held Bradford East, retweeted a user on Twitter last week who dismissed Islamophobia as nonsense, describing it as a crock. She tweeted two others who accused the Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities, Naz Shah, who is standing in the neighbouring constituency, of being not white enough to have experienced Bradford's no-go areas, and claiming the prospective MP's loyalties did not lie in the city. Kemkaran also liked a post labelling Shah, who is a British-born and of Pakistani heritage, a Pakideshi, who pushes the doggy-do Muslim narrative. It comes after the Conservative Party chairman, James Cleverly, apologised on Sunday after a string of allegations of Islamophobia and racism against the party's candidates. The Guardian revealed on Friday that at least 4 ministers had gone on election campaigning trips to endorse Tory candidates accused of anti-Muslim hatred. Kemkaran, who has been pictured with Boris Johnson, became embroiled in a row with Shah after the Shadow Minister accused her of using far-right language, claiming that she told young people at a hustings last Thursday that the city had crime-infested streets and no-go areas. In response, Kemkaran retweeted a user whose Twitter biography reads, "No to that cult Islam," who sent a message to Shah saying, "You are a dunce. There were always no-go areas when I was a kid. Muslims, always the victims, play the race card. Islamophobia, what a crock, what a nasty culture. No integration. What makes you think we will accept third world ways, and why should we?" She also retweeted another user who messaged Shah saying, "We know where your loyalties lie, it's not Bradford." She retweeted a third user who accused Shah of being not white enough to have experienced Bradford's no-go areas. He wrote, "I worked in Bradford for 2 years, Naz. There is some truth in what Lyndon says. If you've not experienced it, it may be because your face is not white enough." Kemkaran, who is fighting to overturn a 20,500 majority from Labour, has since unretweeted the post. The Tory candidate liked a user who replied to Shah's criticisms of Kemkaran's comments about no-go areas in Bradford by writing, "Pushing the doggy-doo-doo Muslim narrative again, another Pakideshi who happens to support rape gangs, pushing her lies via the race card. Truth hurts. There are no-go areas in Bradford. Crime is 50% above the average, not forgetting their other cultural delights, FGM." She also liked another Twitter post from a user who claimed that she was not able to view a house because the sellers required a Sharia mortgage. After Shah pointed out on Twitter, Kemkaran's retweeting the post. Excuse me. Sorry, apologies. She wrote, "Please, Naz Shah, BFD, don't bother trying to shut me up by crying Islamophobia or calling me a racist. Neither is true. I'm standing up for the diverse people of Bradford who are telling me how it is. You should be listening to people and not trying to shut down debate." Shah, who has a 20,000 majority in Bradford West, previously had been at the centre of her own controversy concerning social media posts. The Labour politician liked and retweeted a post in 2017 which said, "Those abused girls in Rotherham and elsewhere just need to shut their mouths for the good of diversity." Shah subsequently claimed it had been a mistake. In 2016, Shah was suspended after anti-Semitic posts she had made emerged. She was later readmitted and made Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities. Kemkaran spent 6 years working for BBC News as a news planner, defence and security producer and a reporter, according to her LinkedIn profile. She came under fire earlier this month when she compared anti-Tory abuse to the discrimination endured by minorities. The candidate responded to a tweet suggesting coming out as a Tory almost worse than coming out as a gay in modern Western society by writing, "I made this exact point on Facebook last week. If you substitute the word Tory with gay, black or trans, the abuse that is heaped on us is eerily similar to the bad old days of discrimination, bigotry and intolerance. She later told Pink News that as a woman of colour and conservative, she experienced years of racist abuse and violence, mostly when at school and in my teenage years. Pardon me for a moment. I have a sore throat tonight. Okay, give me one moment. Okay. The Conservatives, whose leader Johnson claims the party has a zero-tolerance policy on Islamophobia, said an investigation is underway after being approached by The Guardian. A spokesperson said, "This matter is being investigated. Discrimination or abuse of any kind is wrong, and the Conservative Party takes decisive action to deal with any incidents of hatred, abuse or intimidation. Our complaints process is rightly a confidential one, but there is a wide range of sanctions to challenge and change behaviour, including conditions to undertake training, periods of suspension and expulsion, and those are applied on a case-by-case basis." And now a leaked UK document warns Boris Johnson faces a major strategic, political and operational challenge delivering Brexit promises, highlighting the need to escape Brexit and put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands. The DX-EU document published in the Financial Times casts doubt on the ability of the UK government to deliver a new customs arrangement by December 2020. Boris Johnson insists he will not extend the transition period beyond December 2020, meaning that the UK will face a no-deal Brexit if a trade deal is not agreed within 12 months. Trade experts warn that such a free trade deal will take years. In commenting, the SNP candidate for North East Fife, Stephen Gethins, has said, "A vote for the SNP is a vote to escape Brexit and to lock Boris Johnson out of power. This leak is just the latest evidence that Boris Johnson can't be trusted. Even his own civil servants know that the UK government aren't in a position to deliver Brexit on his promised timescale. If we leave the EU, the UK faces years of difficult and contentious trade talks. If you've not liked Brexit so far, you ain't seen nothing yet." And now news about Russia. The World Anti-Doping Agency has voted unanimously to ban Russia from international sport for 4 years for doping offences. Russia now have 21 days to appeal against the sentence, which would see the country banned from participating in next summer's Olympics in Tokyo and the Qatar 2022 World Cup. They will, however, still be able to compete in next year's European Football Championships, where they will also be one of the host countries. As for the World Cup, FIFA said it was in discussions with the WADA to clarify the extent of the decision. Individual Russian athletes will furthermore be able to compete under a neutral banner at the Olympics, providing that they can prove they are drug-free. Under similar conditions, 30 Russians competed at this year's World Athletics Championships as authorised neutral athletes. The new punishment was agreed by WADA's executive committee at a special meeting convened at the headquarters of the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne in Switzerland. It's the most severe sanction yet against the country, which has been accused of running a systematic doping programme and deleting crucial laboratory evidence. WADA's president, Sir Craig Reedy, said, "For too long, Russian doping has detracted from clean sport. Russia was afforded every opportunity to get its house in order and to rejoin the global anti-doping community for the good of its athletes and in the integrity of the sport, but it chose instead to continue in its stance of deception and denial. As a result, the WADA executive has responded in the strongest possible terms, while protecting the rights of Russian athletes that can prove that they were not involved and did not benefit from these fraudulent acts." Some within WADA were more critical of the decision, saying that it fell short of the ultimate sanction of a blanket ban for Russia and its athletes. Russian authorities have strongly criticised the decision, the country's ruling party describing the ban as politicised, and the Deputy Speaker of Russia's parliament called it a way of ousting Russian competitors from global sports. The head of Russia's Biathlon Federation, Vladimir Drachev, called the decision extremely wrong and biased during a live interview broadcast on Russian state television.
Much has been done in Russian sport recently. Athletes have undergone tests for doping. All cases in Russia are part of the past. Evidence of widespread Russian doping was first revealed by WADA 4 years ago, with a report claiming that 643 positive tests had been hidden by the authorities. That resulted in the suspension of the Russian Athletics Federation and 111 individual athletes being banned from the 2016 Games in Rio. And now, again, staying with Russia, we move to the Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin met his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky for the first time on Monday at a summit in Paris aimed at advancing efforts to restore peace in eastern Ukraine. Zelensky and Putin are holding talks together with the leaders of France and Germany in a renewed effort to end a conflict which has killed more than 13,000 people since 2014. Diplomats, however, caution that the prospects for peace are bleak, with Zelensky, a comedian turned president, politically constrained at home and wary of conceding too much, and Putin showing little interest in bending to outside pressure. After a series of bilateral meetings at the Elysee Palace, Putin and Zelensky entered the room for a meeting of the four leaders, making little eye contact with one another and with no smiles. They did not shake hands for the cameras. The main issue is a question of confidence building so that we can move towards the objective of restoring the Ukraine's sovereignty, said a French diplomatic source. There has been scant sign of a peaceful solution to the crisis despite the 2015 ceasefire deal in Minsk. Monday's summit is the first time the four leaders have met under the so-called Normandy format since 2016. Many Ukrainians are concerned about compromising with Russia. They see Putin as an aggressor seeking to restore the Kremlin's influence on the former Soviet Republic and to ruin the Ukraine's aspiration for closer European ties. Kiev wants to seal a lasting ceasefire in the Donbass region in exchange for all prisoners and a timeline for the withdrawal of all illegal armed forces from regions under the control of Russian-backed separatists, Ukrainian officials have said. The summit comes at a time Macron's overtures to Putin for a reset of relations have unnerved European allies. In particular, former communist countries in Eastern and Central European countries who cherish their European Union membership and rely heavily on NATO for their security. French officials say that the Paris summit is a test for Macron's strategy. As much as I am sceptical of Macron's view of Russia, it would have been a mistake not to try unblocking the Donbass deadlock through a Normandy summit. Now let's see what gives or does not, said Bruno Tetres, the deputy director of the Paris-based Strategic Research Foundation. The key to the Minsk Accords succeeding are elections in the disputed eastern Donbass region of the Ukraine, diplomats have said, but both sides accuse each other of failing to stick to the 2015 deal, which includes restoring Ukrainian state control over the entire border with Russia and the withdrawal of heavy weaponry from the conflict zone. And now to news closer to home. Scottish Sea Farms' new £55 million Balcarden hatchery has achieved a crucial milestone, with the first smolts having gone safely out to the sea pens. The smolts, which arrived at Balcarden as eggs back in January of this year, were hatched and reared using a recirculating aquaculture system, and had an average weight of around 160 grams, more than double that of smolts grown in the company when using traditional hatchery methods. Scottish Sea Farms freshwater manager Paul Tanvik said this is a major milestone for all of the team, not just at Balcarden but across the company. The new hatchery has given us greater control over key factors, including water quality, oxygen levels, temperature, light and speed of flow, meaning that we have been able to ensure the best growing environment for the salmon. The result is bigger, more robust smolts that will be better able to withstand natural challenges of the marine environment. We'll also be able to shorten the time that these salmon will spend at sea by up to 2 months, which will reduce their exposure to those challenges and increase survival rates, and have long fallow periods between crops, which will contribute towards a safer environment for subsequent generations of fish. Owing to the facility's ideal location on the shores of Loch Crerrin, the young salmon were transferred directly from the hatchery environment to a wellboat ahead of their onward journey to one of Scottish Sea Farms' Shetland farms, removing the need for transportation by road or air, another huge step forward in terms of fish welfare. The new facility promises to be every bit as transformational with regards to its environmental performance. Operations Manager for Scottish Sea Farms Balcarden Hatchery, Noella Rodriguez, explained, "Incoming water is filtered to remove any particles, and then it's disinfected using UV light and circulated to anywhere in the hatchery where it's maintained at a constant temperature between 12 and 14 degrees, before being cleaned again and recirculated every 20 to 30 minutes. Combined, this uses 98% less fresh water and significantly less energy with heating and cooling water at traditional hatcheries. Adding to this, the building uses a biomass energy system thought to deliver the biggest CO2 savings of any renewable heat source to provide heating and hot water. And there is provision for a hydro scheme so that we can generate even more energy in a greener way. The state-of-the-art facility, which includes 4 incubation units and 4 hatcheries, has taken over 2 years to build and is due to have its official opening in 2020. Scottish Sea Farms Managing Director Jim Gallagher commented, "We haven't rushed the process. We've taken care to make sure we get it right at every stage. However, the sheer scale of the investment being made, the time, the thought and the money signifies our commitment to the fish's health and to providing a more secure food supply. The RAS technology enables us to control with pinpoint accuracy when the salmon are ready to go to sea, giving the fish the best possible experience and giving customers world over more security over supply than ever before." And now to the weather. Storm Atia has brought high winds and power cuts. The wet and windy weather that buffeted the UK on Sunday and Monday is expected to continue, with 2 yellow alerts in place from 5 a.m. on Tuesday, stretching from the Midlands to the Scottish Islands. Gusts of up to 100 miles per hour were predicted to cause disruption through to Thursday, potentially affecting voting in the general election. Storm Atia swept in from Ireland on Sunday, bringing gales that caused disruption to power and transport networks across the southwest and Wales, and led to yellow weather alerts being issued overnight, with winds of 70 mph being measured in Culdrose in Cornwall at about 9 p.m. Power companies registered 26 faults in the southwest on Sunday and 2 in Wales, which led to 5,500 customers being cut off. There were lane closures on the M48 Severn Bridge on Sunday, and coastal communities were warned of tidal surges that could throw debris over sea defences. Strong winds are pretty widespread, said the Met Office meteorologist Alex Burkle. It's very windy in the west and southwest, so that's where we're going to see the greatest impact, unfortunately. The Met Office says delays are likely to continue on road, rail, air and ferry transport, and that short-term loss of power was possible in some areas on Monday. In Ireland, there were warnings of coastal flooding, and Christmas events across the country were cancelled due to high winds. Thousands of residents were temporarily without power on the west coast of County Galway and West Limerick. A silver lining in the blustery conditions was that renewable power record was set on Sunday evening when wind farms generated more than 16 gigawatts of power, 5 times the output expected from the new Hinkley Point C nuclear power station, according to the National Grid. On Sunday, the wind supplied 43.7% of UK electricity, against only 20% for nuclear. And that is the end of the Scottish News at 7 tonight. I will be with you again on Thursday night for the election special alongside my colleagues. And as you know, we are in the middle of a crowdfunder to help the studio to expand. If you would like to help us to continue to make programmes for you and to expand our activities into 2020, you can find details of how to become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter on your screen now. And also, following this programme, there will be a short video explaining how you can become a supporter, and also how you can donate to the crowdfunder. But that's it from me tonight on Scotland at 7, so thank you from all of the team here at Broadcasting Scotland, and very good night to you.
that's been done by Broadcasting Scotland in giving community activists, yes activists, Scottish activists a platform other than the traditional media outlets.